Sometimes people disappear without a trace, or perhaps an entire ancient civilization. Whether it's thought to be alien abductions, wormholes, or natural occurrences, these cases make for strange mysteries that often go unsolved. Number 10. Wallace D. Fard was born in 1877 and was the founder of a movement that was named the Nation of Islam. Wallace was occasionally referred to as Black Muslim, Wali Farad, Farad Muhammad, or F. Muhammad Ali. The movement that he founded was based in the United States in Detroit, Michigan. The Nation of Islam, or the NOI, was an Islamic and African-American nationalist movement that was established in 1930. It was Wallace's mission to teach the downtrodden and defenseless people a knowledge of both themselves as well as of God. Members of the movement studied the Quran, worshipped Allah, and accepted Muhammad as the prophet while believing in the notion of black nationalism. Elijah Muhammad, though, succeeded Wallace in 1934, and the movement rose to popularity among African Americans during the 1950s and the 1960s. It carried with it its message of racial independence, established mosques in urban regions, and converted African American men to the religion. Wallace, however, had established the Temple of Islam and the University of Islam. He also expressed that African Americans were to prepare for the inevitable race wars. He additionally gave his followers new Arabic names to replace those that were assigned to them, or originated during their slavery days. But it was in 1934 that Wallace disappeared. He was regarded as the incarnation of Allah, and the 26th of February, his birthday, began to be observed as Savior's Day. It was in 1932 that the authorities had tried to connect the man to a ritualistic case and had run him out of the city. He returned to the city on the 26th of April in 1934, but the police then raided the University of Islam and thereafter arrested Wallace and various other members, resulting in a riot as it was so referred to by the authorities. The man was never seen again, and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance remain unknown. As per a Reddit post, some have theorized that the NOI founder had boarded a UFO upon his disappearance. It was found that the man's origins were just as obscure as his disappearance. One of the Reddit users had added images of the man, who appeared to be more Afghan than Spaniard or a New Zealander. Anthropologists have described him as most likely coming from Afghanistan, Tajikistan, or Iran. Those who knew him stated that his accent was consistent with that of an educated Hindu. This is the same accent that would be found in both Pakistan as well as Afghanistan. The surname Fard was also common in Pakistan. His father's name, Zared, is an Urdu name. It was therefore suggested that the mysterious man was an Afghan or a Tajik immigrant, who had even possibly been a Kurd from Pakistan. His name was likely Walid Fard, which was changed to Wally D. Ford, and finally Wallace Dodd Ford. What's also interesting is when Walid Fard first appeared in America, he identified as Caucasian or white as per a census form. The physical anthropologist would also link him to Caucasoid groups in the Central Asia region, and so for this period, identifying as white would be seen as the appropriate term. It was found that he married a Caucasian woman who was named Hazel, and together they had a son. What was really strange and mysterious to most people was that he would later identify with the African American plight, and his ethnic origins were therefore suppressed. But a newspaper article from the time would later bust them with the headline stating that the African American Muslim founder had been exposed as Caucasian. But why would he identify as African American during a time of racism, segregation, and so much more? The man himself was an entire mystery. Where did he come from? Where did he go? Wallace was found to be one of the characters in a novel by Jeffrey Eugenides, and is said to be one of the most interesting and one of the most mysterious characters in the book. There have been wild theories that have come about after Wallace's disappearance, including the suggestions that he had changed his name and served a lengthy prison sentence in Indiana. It was also thought that he later returned to the Middle East, or that he remained in control of the movement, but from behind the scenes. Number 9. A secret tunnel found in Mexico may solve the mysteries of the Teotihuacan ruins. This was the heading of one 2016 article. It had been in the fall of 2003 when a heavy rainstorm swept through the Teotihuacan ruins. the metropolis 30 miles northeast of Mexico City, that's studded with pre-Aztec pyramids. Dig sites of the ruins became overpowered by water. The city's central courtyard began to weaken and eventually broke. It had been one morning that the archaeologist with Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, Sergio Gomez, had arrived at the site. He soon discovered a 3-foot-wide sinkhole that had opened up at the foot of the pyramid that was named the Temple of the Plumed Serpent. Gomez's first thought was, what am I looking at? And the second was, how exactly are we going to fix this? In the design of the metropolis, the ancient architecture arranged the major monuments on a north to south axis, with one avenue linking the largest structure, the Temple of the Sun, with the Ciudadela, which is the southeastern courtyard housing the Temple of the Plumed Serpent. Gomez had been aware that archaeologists had previously uncovered a narrow tunnel that was beneath the Temple of the Sun, and he theorized that he was looking at a mirror tunnel that led to a chamber underneath the Temple of the Plumed Serpent. It was thought that perhaps these tunnels represented the underworld, as per the civilization's belief system. The entrance that was revealed by the sinkhole, though, was not the initial entrance to the system. The actual entrance would be found a few yards back and had intentionally been sealed off with massive boulders 2,000 years ago for reasons undisclosed. Gomez went on to make arrangements to have the tunnel explored. He erected his tent over the hold and arranged for a ground-penetrating radar device. In the early months of 2004, the work would begin. The archaeologist handpicked some 20 people of both archaeologists as well as workers. The earth beneath the Ciudadela was scanned, and each afternoon the 20 people would return to Gomez with results, which would be uploaded to computers. And by 2005, a digital map of the tunnel was complete. It was, as Gomez suspected, the tunnel ran 300 feet from the Ciudadela to the mill of the temple. Whatever was inside the tunnel was supposed to stay hidden for all eternity. Teotihuacan had been the longest-standing Mesoamerican mystery. The site of this ancient culture has been very little understood. The name is said to translate to the place where men become gods. What the tunnels are used for remains one of the mysteries surrounding this site as well. It's been guessed that the chamber beneath the temple was used for either religious ceremonies or sacrificial ones. There are plans to further investigate the ruins and to search for more artifacts that the tunnel and chamber may or may not contain. Gomez had concluded that perhaps the tunnel was sealed off as someone or something had been buried right beneath the temple, perhaps a ruler or a king. Number 8. Kiren Richard Horman was born on the 9th of September 2002 in Oregon. It was in the year of 2010 when the boy would mysteriously vanish and remain missing to this day. On the 4th of June in 2010, the second grader arrived at Portland Skyline Elementary School, a Friday, and the day of the school's science fair. He'd been setting up his project with help of his stepmother, Terry Moulton, who left shortly after. One of the other students had seen him around 9 that morning near the school's southern entrance, but the boy had not reported to any classes, nor did he board the bus to head back home. He was never seen by anyone ever since that day. Kiren had displayed an interest in forensic sciences, and on the day he disappeared, he was wearing a black t-shirt with the words CSI written on it, along with the logo from the crime show. The focus of the disappearance quickly fell on Terry, who would go on to fail a polygraph test twice, but it's noted that polygraph tests are inconsistent and unreliable. She would later divorce the boy's father and would be named the main suspect both by the court documents as well as by her own lawyers. It was according to a timeline of events that had revealed that Terry was at 2 grocery stores that morning until 10 minutes past 10. Between that time and 11:39, her whereabouts were unaccounted for. It was during this unaccounted for period that she claimed to have been driving rural roads with her child, Kiara, to soothe an ear infection. She then checked into a 24-hour fitness, 11 miles away at 11:39. She stayed there for an hour, and at 21 minutes past 1 that afternoon, she arrived home and logged into Facebook. She logged onto Facebook and posted the picture of Kiren that she had taken at the fair. Kane, Kiren's father, met up with her, and they journeyed to the school bus drop-off at 3:30, but found that Kiren had not been aboard. They then hurried to the school where they were informed that the boy was marked as absent that day, and thereafter the police were called. The largest missing person case in Oregon's history ensued. Initially, Terry was not a suspect in the case until the polygraph tests and the unaccounted-for time. But none of these details would amount to anything and were considered mere suspicion. For 10 days, Kiren's case had been considered a missing person case, but investigators would later come to find that it was a criminal investigation. According to a local landscaper, Terry had offered him money to carry out an unlawful deed on her then-husband Kane. The investigators would go on to inform him of this, and so he left the house and hired a family lawyer. Kane would tell KPIC in 2015 that there have since been no clues, no evidence as to the whereabouts of the missing boy. In all the searches from both the private and sheriff's offices, there's been no evidence. He's not around here, so the question is, where is he, is what Kane asked. To this very day, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department is actively seeking leads in the case, but there's been no breakthrough as of yet. They're no closer to solving the disappearance, even after a decade. Last year, the authorities released an age-progressed image of the missing boy. It was said that he was last seen wearing black cargo pants, white socks, and black Skechers with orange trim. He has brown hair and blue eyes and wears prescription glasses. On his forehead, the boy has a distinct V-shaped strawberry birthmark. DNA standards from the family, along with Kiren's toothbrush, were actively searched against the National DNA Database, but to no avail. Dental records and X-rays have also been uploaded to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System to be compared. Number 7. In 2022, the ruins of a previously submerged city on the Tigris River emerged. It was found that the mysterious city belonged to that of an enigmatic empire. The ancient city in Iraq was called Zaku and had been revealed due to a severe drought. While such droughts across Iraq have been the cause of major humanitarian concern, it was also due to this that archaeologists had an opportunity to excavate a lost city. Since the area had been suffering from these droughts, the country has been forced into drawing large amounts of water from the Mosul Reservoir. It was due to the drastic drop in water levels that the 3,400-year-old city would be revealed from the banks of the reservoir. A team of Germans and Kurdish individuals were quick to establish a site and excavate the city. It was thereafter that they determined it to be the city of Zaku, a trade center of the Bronze Age Empire from 1550 to 1350 BC. Over 3,000 years ago, traders in the city would wait for wooden beams that were cut from the forests and the mountains of the north and east Mesopotamia, which spanned across Iraq, Kuwait, and areas of Iran, Syria, and Turkey. The beams would then be sent down the Tigris River and float all the way to Zaku, where the civilization would wait, collect, and store them in their storehouses. It was from the same mountains that merchants who were transporting metal and minerals would travel using donkeys or camels all the way to the ancient city. After selling these wares in Zaku, the merchants would cross the Tigris River before heading to the borderlands. The city was found to have been founded in 1800 BC by the Old Babylonian Empire that had ruled the area between the 19th and 15th centuries BC. The trading ports quickly grew into an important commercial city in the area for 600 years. Not long after this, it would be struck by an earthquake and thereafter abandoned. It disappeared entirely in the 1980s. This had come after the project of the Mosul Dam that was built under the then Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein. The city was flooded and submerged, but it was the inhabitants of this lost city who were the most mysterious. Around 1500 BC, the city had fallen with its empire as the Hittites, an Indo-European civilization from Anatolia, which is now present-day Turkey. After the Hittites returned to their northern lands, the Mitanni Empire, native to Syria, had taken over the ancient city. It was then that a big and powerful empire would be established. Few sites and buildings that can be accredited to this empire have since been discovered, and very little is known about those who lived in Zaku. And it's uncertain as to what the population of the city was. What is known is that it thrived during its second ruling. Infrastructure that was found by the archaeologists included a palace for the ruler, fortifications for the city to be protected against any invading forces, and a public storehouse, each of which was made from bricks that had been molded from mud. The key feature of Zaku was the storehouse, with rooms of up to 6 meters wide and 8 meters long, housing wheat and barley and woods and metals. It's not hoped that the waters will once again recede, but if they did, it would allow more of an opportunity for further study to really understand the civilization that inhabited Zaku. Number 6. Jesse Evans was thought to have either been born in Texas or Missouri back in 1853. He was an outlaw of the Old West and had been the leader of the Jesse Evans gang, of which Billy the Kid had also partaken in. Evans had his first encounter with the law upon his arrest, along with his parents, in 1871 in Elk City, Kansas. He was arrested for passing counterfeit money. The following year, he relocated to New Mexico and worked there on John Chisholm's farm. He would find cow handling to be a hard job and would soon take up being an outlaw, where he would commit cattle rustling and armed robbery. The gang consisted of Evans, Billy the Kid, Frank Backer, Tom Hill, Pony Deal, and a few others who would roam New Mexico and work for other gangs to find easy pickings. Upon the eruption of the Lincoln County War, the Murphy-Dolan faction would go on to hire the gang as enforcers, and Billy the Kid, interestingly, was on the opposing side. Sometime after this, a price was placed on the head of Jesse Evans, and so he fled to Southwest Texas. It was here that the members and Evans would continue their cattle rustling activities. Texas Rangers tracked them down close to the Presidio on the 3rd of July in 1880. A firearm battle ensued and Evans fatally wounded Texas Ranger George Bingham, and one of the Rangers had fatally wounded gang member John Gross. During this battle, the gang was forced to surrender and Evans was sentenced to prison in the Huntsville Penitentiary. It was in May of 1882, 2 years later, that he escaped and was thereafter never seen or heard from again. He had entered the state prison on the 1st of December in 1880 to serve a 20-year prison sentence. Evans was a height of 5 foot 8 inches and weighed just over 150 pounds. His eyes were gray and he had light hair against a fair complexion. No images of him have ever been authenticated. The details surrounding his origins also seemed suspicious, including his date of birth. Other aliases included Jesse Graham and Will Davis. Additionally, it can't be said for certain that Jesse Evans was his real name. It was alleged that he'd not spoken much during his short incarceration. Occasionally, sightings of him would surface, but none of them led to his arrest or discovery. Authors and Lincoln County war experts have remained baffled as to what became of the outlaw. His disappearance was rated as a mystery and has not been solved to this day. But there are some theories as to what may have happened. There had been a time when the name Jesse was recognizable as Billy the Kid. Just like Billy, Evans had engaged in various criminal activities within the New Mexico region as well as West Texas, before, during, and after the county war in the late 1870s. Billy, whose real name is believed to be Henry McCarty, was similar to that of Evans and his various aliases and origins, which were found to be rather vague in both cases. In October of 1877, Billy, who was then named Henry Antrim, was riding along with the gang led by Evans. They'd come to serve the Lincoln business in a monopoly run, and Billy had befriended the rival, John Henry Tunstall. It was thereafter that Evans would be imprisoned and escape, disappearing into thin air. It's theorized that he decided to clean up his act and no longer went by the name of Jesse Evans. With this theory came the idea that perhaps Jesse Evans was even Billy the Kid, given that they both used aliases and had unsubstantiated origins. It was also stated in a book by Emerson Hugh that Evans didn't fear Billy the Kid. The disappearance continued to baffle experts, historians, and researchers. Sightings from El Paso and Arizona had come about, but nothing was supported. In the 1920s, a historian named Mullen had met a man who called himself Joe Evans, who had fit the age as well as the description of Jesse, but definite proof was lacking. The disappearance of the well-known outlaw has been a mystery ever since. Number 5. For quite some time, the disappearance of the Minoan civilization has proved to be a great mystery for researchers, historians, and archaeologists. It's also been the source of fascination among such enthusiasts. The Bronze Age civilization came about in Crete and thrived from 3000 BC to 1450 BC. They were most known for their achievements in thalassocracy, architecture, and trade relations that they'd made with other civilizations. Despite such accomplishments, the Minoans came to a mysterious and abrupt end in about 1450 BC. Their sudden end has been shrouded in mystery, but has served as a point of fascination for many. There have only been mere theories as to what became of the civilization. A popular theory is that the Minoans were disrupted by a large volcanic eruption. According to archaeological evidence, it was found that an eruption had occurred on the Santorini island around 1500 BC. It caused incredible damage to the other civilizations and resulted in tsunamis that overwhelmed nearby settlements. Historians believe that the Minoans had been one of the civilizations affected by the eruption, ultimately leading to their downfall. While there are supporters for this theory, there are other suggestions that are to be considered. Some researchers point to the possibility that there was an invasion by foreign powers that could have overpowered the Minoans. Others have come to the conclusion that it was due to internal conflict or otherwise a natural disaster. With the main focus being on the volcanic eruption theory, the others have not been as thoroughly explored. It had been 50 years after the eruption that the city was left in ruins. Was it the eruption that led to the demise of the civilization? The whodunit had been hunting scientists for ages. Researchers had discovered that only a little ash had fallen on Crete, and the prevailing winds had taken the volcanic ash in the opposite direction. Clay tablets were later found by archaeologists and served as a substantial piece of evidence that stated that the Minoans were still around 50 years after the initial eruption. Volcanologist Floyd McCoy from the University of Hawaii sought to unravel the mystery. Strangely, in the area of which the Minoans occupied, no remains had been found. But chief archaeologist Christos Dumas believed that the people had not survived and that their remains were waiting to be uncovered. But this has yet to happen. An incredible discovery birthed a new theory, though. This volcanic eruption was the largest and most devastating of the last 10,000 years, and could have even been bigger than what scientists initially thought. It was theorized that due to the immensity of the volcanic eruption and the tsunami that followed, the Minoans faced ruined harvests that would last for many summers. It was also possible that the people began to disobey their priest kinds in the palaces, such as places like Knossos, thus marking the beginning of a 50-year decline of the entirety of the civilization. They were also in no position to defend themselves against the Greeks from the mainland, who took control of the island. This was the theory that merged all the theories together, but it remains only that, a theory, a mere suggestion. Number 4. Charles E. Bowles was known by different names, including Black Bart and the Outlaw Poet. He was one of the most notorious stagecoach robbers to have operated in the northern area of California and southern Oregon. He was also known by Charles Bolton and T.Z. Spalding, and had been considered a gentleman bandit who had a reputation for style and sophistication. Charles was born in 1829 in Norfolk, England, to a couple named John and Maria Bowles. At the age of 2, he and the family relocated to Jefferson County, New York, where John would purchase a farm north of Plessis Village. Charles would receive a common school education, and when he was older, he and his cousin David would set out for the gold fields of California in the late 1840s. After spending some time in Missouri, the two would head to California, where they would arrive in 1850. After some tiresome work, the pair returned home 2 years later. But this was brief, and the pair, along with an additional party, returned to California. His surname would be changed to Bowles, and he went on to marry Mary Elizabeth Johnson. Charles would later volunteer for the Army in the years of the Civil War. During 1862, he became a sergeant and was later seriously wounded. After the war, he returned home to his wife and would then head to Montana to find his fortune. The last letter that Mary received from her husband had come from Silver Bow, Montana, and was dated 1871. The letters abruptly came to a stop. Months turned into years, and Mary believes that her husband was overcome by Native Americans, as per the rumors that circulated at the time. It was thereafter that a new Charles appeared, Charles Bolton, an elegantly dressed man in his mid-50s. He stood 5 feet 8 inches tall. He had blue or gray eyes and a rather bushy mustache. It had been 4 years since the last letter had been received by Mary, and it was at this time that this dapper man would go on to rob his first stagecoach in 1875. In 1877, he had done his 4th robbery, which was when he then identified himself as Black Bart and as a poet. In 1883, he returned to the area of his first robbery, Copperopolis. A coach was being controlled by Reason McConnell, and it had only one passenger. Charles had ordered McConnell to take them over the crest of the hill and proceeded to go at the strongbox on the coach with an axe. After retrieving some items from the box, Charles was ready to flee, but McConnell managed to fire at him. A bullet hit the hand of Black Bart, causing him to drop some of the items, including his own handkerchief. It was with the help of this that the detective would track him down to San Francisco. Charles was convicted and sentenced to 6 years in prison. 4 years of his prison sentence and good behavior would allow for his release in 1888. He lived in Nevada thereafter, before he disappeared to the Visalia House Hotel in California. He was tracked to the hotel, but upon the arrival of Wells Fargo, he had left. Charles Bowles was last seen on the 28th of February of that year. His robbery career lasted over 8 years, and during this time, he was described as polite and never used ill language. He also didn't steal from passengers, nor did he ever use his firearm. What happened to Black Bart remains a mystery. It's been suggested that Charles returned to the old mining camps, and others believe that he continued on with his career in robbing stagecoaches until Wells Fargo had offered him $200 a month if he would leave their vehicles alone. Wells Fargo, of course, denied this allegation, but the legend continues on. Black Bart is a name that's been taken from fictional adventure stories in the newspaper. The man was known for wearing a flour sack over his head and a hat on top. No one knows where Charles had ended up, nor when he passed or even where. The one poem he left at one of the scenes read as follows: "Here I lay down to sleep, to wait for the coming morrow. Perhaps success, perhaps defeat, and everlasting sorrow. Yet come what will, I'll try it on, my condition can't be worse. And if there's money in that box, 'tis money in my purse." Number 3. One of the Earth's most bizarre geological features is that of the Al Nasla rock, and its formation remains a mystery. A 6-meter or 20-foot high rock sits on 2 natural pedestals that make them appear as though they're levitating in perfect balance with each other. The Nasla rock was, hard to believe, created by accident, but scientists have theorized that its existence centers around a natural weathering process. Strangely, the rocky formation has a precise slice right down its center that appears to have been the work of an advanced tool or even a laser beam. The enigmatic formation can be found in the Tima Oasis of Saudi Arabia and is said to be a petroglyph. Petroglyphs are images that are made by carving or engraving the surface of a rock. On the surface of this one, Arabian horses can be seen along with humans and ibexes carved into it. It's unestablished as to when exactly the carvings were done, but the sandstone rocks are believed to have been formed thousands of years ago. One theory as to where the split down the Nasla rock came from suggested that it sits upon a fault line, and the split was created when the ground shifted, resulting in a split through the weak point. Should this have been the case, the crack may have then acted as a wind tunnel for sand gusts that swept across the landscapes. As the grains of sand would pass through the gap, it would sand down the uneven crack, resulting in a smooth finish. It was also theorized that the crack is a joint, which in terms of geology refers to a break that naturally forms in a formation without displacement. This fracture divides the rock and is often unusually straight, such as that of the Nasla. A prominent theory was suggestive of freeze-thaw weathering. It was thought that when water got into a small crack and connected with the sandstone, it froze and began to expand, thus exaggerating the small crack. Once the cooling period had ended, the ice would then thaw and melt, leaving a distinct perfect gap splitting the stone in two. It had also been suggested the split could have been made with simple metal tools by an ancient civilization. As we know, they've become well known for their precision. It may have also been the site of religious significance or even an early piece of artwork. And so it's yet to be determined as to what caused this perfect slice right down the center of the mysterious Al Nasla rock. Number 2. AA Hillis Addis appeared on the 10 writers who disappeared mysteriously list. Addis had been a short story writer who was influenced greatly by Mexican folk tales. She was also the first American writer who translated those folk tales into English. She was born in 1857 in Leavenworth, Kansas. Addis roamed the western frontier as well as the Mexican wilderness into villages and miners' camps. At the age of 15, she and her family relocated to Los Angeles. She then left the area and wound up in Mexico to write for the bilingual newspaper Two Republics. After a brief issue with the editor, Theodore Chesterfield, and his wife Addis left Mexico and moved to Santa Barbara. Here, she would begin to collect material about prominent citizenry of the region for a book on biographies that was to be published. During an interview, she met Charles A. Stork, whom she married shortly after. Stork was a local attorney and the owner of the Santa Barbara News Press. Stork had been attracted to the writer for her quick mind and her social standing, and she saw him as a financial security system. In 1891, Addis's History of Santa Barbara was published, her only book. Thereafter, she would allege that she was being treated poorly by her husband and his son, Tommy, and so Stork retaliated with a divorce complaint. It was a bitter and drawn-out divorce process. This, along with a criminal trial, was covered in local press, but they would write Addis as being mentally unstable. It had been during the divorce proceedings that the writer would soon learn that her very own lawyer was on the side of her husband, and so she sought revenge. Thereafter, she wanted alimony, of which Stork refused, and would end up forcing her into an insane asylum, but sources may vary on this account. A second divorce trial was held in 1892, where a judge had ruled that the husband had not been cruel, nor had the wife been insane. 3 years later, the divorce was granted. By this time, Addis was living in San Francisco and was returning to her fictional writings. In 1898, Stork's newspaper and other local figures began to receive some anonymous letters that were accusing two individuals of immoral and scandalous conduct. It was around this time that she was back in Santa Barbara, and it was found that her writing had matched that of these letters, and so she was convicted. Addis faced a year in prison as well as a large fine, but was now facing another accusation. Her defense attorney in this case stood by her side as she pleaded not guilty, and in 1899, Stork was to dismiss the case against his ex-wife. 5 months later, the free Addis had won her appeal for a new trial to be seen on the anonymous letter conviction, but she didn't stick around for this. Addis disappeared from California as well as from the newspapers. It was alleged in 1902 she was forced into an insane asylum by Stork, from which she would escape and never be seen again. Research, as conducted by Ashley C. Short, stated that Addis had reinvented herself and called herself Adelaida Hillis Jackson, the name of her mother's family, and that of her second husband, Grant Jackson. She also added Ida to her first name. It was theorized that she lived the next 30 years in Texas, either in San Francisco or Mexico in the San Antonio area. It was also stated that she spent the last decade of her life in the state hospital, but this has remained unconfirmed. If she'd remained in said asylum, where would the stories of her escape and disappearance have come from? The most direct evidence of this theory is a reference to one of the highlights of Addis's writing career, an article from 1889 that was published in Harper's New Monthly magazine that described her trip to a remote town in Guanajuato, Mexico, to interview artists who produced iridescent pottery. The author was referred to as A.H. Jackson. As a child, Addis was referred to as Ida, and as a teenager and adult, it was Ida. The reference to her first initial being A suggested she took on a new name, with the last 3 letters being Ida. But one piece of the puzzle doesn't quite fit. A.H. Jackson was significantly younger, and it appeared that she became younger with each census, which estimated birth years that ranged from 1873 to 1881. If Addis and Jackson were the same person, then either her reported age in the census was mistaken, or Addis herself had self-reported the age and lied. Number 1. A curious sight to behold was discovered on an Alaskan beach. The mystery is referred to as the Petroglyph Beach State Historic Site, and it holds exactly what the name suggests: 8,000-year-old rock carvings littered across the beach. There have been various hypotheses as to the origins of these over 40 different rock carvings that have been etched here. It's said that this site is one of the highest known concentrations of petroglyphs in the world. Archaeologists agreed that the etchings were done around 8,000 years ago, and were done so by the Tlingit, an Alaskan native group that inhabits the southeastern archipelago. But when it comes to the purpose of these carvings, that's where the mystery comes in. According to an informative card on the beach's entry, the petroglyphs were suggested to be territorial markings that warned off enemies that encroached on the land. It was thought that these were underwater beacons that would coax salmon to swim into river mouths that feed into the Inside Passage Straits. It was even suggested that these markings indicate an important fishing site, or maybe a settlement. Some of the rocks had included carvings of spirals or cartoonish-looking faces or creatures, or perhaps even gods. The Tlingit were accomplished carvers, as so evident by the totem poles that tower over the region, which would depict similar entities including orcas, salmon, ravens, and thunderbirds. Perhaps the works are just mere artistic practice, but historians are not so convinced. While it's been widely accepted that these are the carvings of the Tlingit, it's been stressed that this is not a confirmed theory. The petroglyphs could have certainly been made by inhabitants that predated the Tlingit. It was suggested that the etchings were carved by the Haida people, who were ancestors who had dwelled on the Haida Gwaii Islands for 13,000 years or more. These inhabitants were said to have likely been developers of canoes and may have sailed 300 miles towards Wrangell, where they went on to carve such images on the beach of the area. It's also suggested that an even earlier civilization may have been responsible. All theories may be possible, as the imagery shares the elements of these societies, including both the Tlingit and the Haida, but also of much older civilizations that predate both. We may never know for certain what the imagery means or who actually created it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.